It's time for Real Estate 101 with the Karey Brown team from Realty Executives Preferred Advisors.
Good Sunday morning to you. This is Karey Brown, broker-owner of Realty Executives Preferred Advisors here in Topeka, and you're listening to Real Estate 101. Today I am here with CWC Electric and the owner, Chuck Hogan. Good morning, Chuck.
Good morning.
And so we're going to be discussing a wide variety of things that affect you when it comes to electricity. We're going to start off with fire prevention. Chuck is going to be discussing all the different types of fire prevention things that you should be doing. So take it away.
Well, as we go into the winter months, fall and winter, we want to be thinking about fire safety. You know, October every year is National Fire Prevention Month. And the absolute number one thing you've got to think about is, do you have proper working smoke detectors? There's several things to think about. First of all, placement of smoke detectors. What is required now in new construction, and really it's a good rule of thumb for everybody, that placement of them, you should have one inside every bedroom, one outside every sleeping area, and one on every floor. So you'll end up, a lot of people have just one on each floor, but really to completely cover, they should be in all those locations, and they should be interconnected. So in other words, you have a fire, smoldering fire down in your basement, it's going to set that smoke detector off, which will in turn turn on all the smoke detectors through the house, even the ones in your bedroom. And it used to be that we had to run wire to all those locations, and would be really cost prohibitive to do in a house that's already built, existing construction. But now they have wireless smoke detectors, so they can transmit wirelessly, talk to one another, and activate each other. So it's a very that saves a lot of money and increases safety in your house. So that being said, you think about placement, then you think about maintenance of the smoke detectors. You can take a little canned air, blow out the dust out of them, make sure you got fresh batteries. Of course, the rule of thumb is whenever the time changes, that's when you change your batteries every 6 months. Even if your house has hardwired smoke detectors, those have a battery backup in them in case so that they'll still operate during a power failure. So you want to, some of them you have to remove it, and the battery is accessible through the back, but most that are built today, you can remove the battery without removing the smoke detector. And you have to think about the age of the smoke detector. Smoke detectors actually have a limit. They're only good for 10 years. And they all have a manufacturer date stamped on the back of them, so you don't pull it off, look at that. And if it's getting close, if you're still got a year left, mark that on your calendar and be ready to, prepare to change those out next year. But oftentimes you're just surprised how fast time flies. And, you think, well, I just built this house or we just moved in, but oftentimes those are already outdated.
Wow. So the next conversation would be winter electric failures. I know we're going into the winter season here before we even know it. What should you be doing to make sure, like whenever the electricity goes out, if you're using a generator, so that you're using it safely? And what are suggestions for that?
Well, there's several issues to think about. Most people don't have a permanently installed standby generator, so they may be using a little portable generator. First thing to think about, though, is where you're placing the generator. Do not set it inside the structure anywhere or even close to the structure. It should be several feet away from our house with the exhaust pointed away from the house. All doors and windows nearby closed so no draft can pull those fumes in there. Every year across the country, people die because of the carbon monoxide fumes caused by portable generators. So that's number one, making sure you're placing it. Don't leave it anywhere. People think that, well, I can put it in the garage. It'll be okay. That's not a part of the house, but it's a shared attic space that carbon monoxide will seep in through all the cracks of the house. So you want to think about that. The next thing is, if you're tying the generator into your electrical system, you have to have installed already some type of transfer switch so that there's no way that the utility power and the generator power can both be on at the same time inside the electrical panel. If the utility was to be turned on, if you did have a situation like that, and that line voltage hit your generator, It could cause severe damage, cause injuries, death. On the reverse side, if the electricity from your generator goes out onto the power lines and goes through the transformer, you can actually electrocute the lineman trying to repair the lines that are feeding your house. So if you're tying into your electrical system, you have to have a proper transfer switch. And there's several ways to do that, so you just want to call an electrician and get ideas on how to do that.
Wow, that's scary. How would a lineman even have a clue if somebody's done that?
He would not. So, I mean, they would test, they always test everything before they start operating on it. But once they start operating, they have the assumption that everything's clear. And so, it's a very dangerous situation for them. I mean, they always operate in a manner in which, they're acting as if everything is hot, but still, they should be able to assume once they've shut power off that it remains off. And so if you introduce power onto that and see it, when it goes through the transformer, you think, well, my generator is just putting out 120 volts, but it goes through that transformer, it multiplies it into thousands of volts that goes down to that lineman. So it works just as it steps it down coming into your house, it steps it back up going the other direction. Wow.
So people doing it themselves probably wouldn't even know that they were doing it wrong.
No. It's, people don't know. And there's really some cost-effective ways to do it. There are companies that sell kits that an electrician can install on your existing panel that will safely isolate the generator from the utility power. Really, people think, it's going to cost thousands of dollars to do that, and it really doesn't. But every job is unique. You'd have to have your electrician come out and evaluate it and give you an estimate. But really, there are very cost-effective ways to do that safely.
Wow. So that's definitely something to know. I know a lot of folks we see it pretty often in real estate. A lot of electrical work is done DIY, and that's not always the best thing. So let's go into different ways to things that, as a homeowner, you should be able to do yourself without an electrician, but, when to call the electrician as far as maintenance is concerned, like outlets. How long do those things last? What should they be looking for?
Well, an outlet, everything's taken care of. It can last decades. And there's simple, very, very simple plug-in testers, cost less than $10 at, a hardware store. And a homeowner can go around and plug those in. It has indicator lights, and it'll have a little legend on there and tell you what it means. If everything's working properly, or if things are wired in reverse, or if a ground is missing. Those indicator lights will tell you everything you need to know. It's a very simple thing that anybody can do. If something is not right, well, at that point, call an electrician. They can evaluate that. Other things, you can think about GFCI outlets that are required in your kitchen, bathroom, outside. They have a little test button on them. In fact, if you look closely on it, it'll say test monthly. Well, I don't test mine monthly, and no one else does either. But we really should. Press that, and it should trip or turn off. If it doesn't, then it needs to be replaced. There are several generations of GFI outlets. Now, it used to be the older ones, when they quit providing the GFI protection, the outlet would continue working. You wouldn't know you didn't have the protection. And you probably see that a lot in real estate inspections, called out by the inspectors. Then we moved into the next generation, in which they were required to manufacture the GFI outlets, where once the GFI protection quits working, the whole outlet quits working. So that's a good sign. Hey, that quit working. It just simply needs to be replaced, which if somebody's handy with tools, they turn off the power to that, they can change that out themselves. Now we've got the newest generation of GFI outlets. They are self-testing. And so they actually, since they, learn through, human behavior, we don't do those tests. They're now designed to test themselves. So you will, more often, people will see it as a failure rate. It'll do its self-test, and it'll quit working at that point. And again, it just simply needs to be replaced. Again, a pretty simple procedure that a lot of homeowners could do themselves.
So going into the wintertime, we're looking at more and more Christmas lights and things like that. Funny story, my mom loves Christmas, decorates like crazy, and yes, I told her I was going to pick on her on the radio. You could land an airplane in her driveway. I mean, so many lights. It's just over the top. So every time she would plug in her Christmas lights, she'd flip all the breakers, and so she finally figured out, well, I need to have its own separate breaker for all these Christmas lights. What do you suggest? When's too much? How do you determine when you need an extra box for certain items that you're putting in around the house, like even hot tubs, things like that?
Well, there's certain items, hot tubs, we'll start with that for example. That is something that's a 240-volt appliance. It needs to have its own circuit. There are certain requirements about the safety disconnect or service disconnect for it on the outside. And again, you really need to call an electrician to have that evaluated. If you're switching from a gas dryer to electric dryer, again, all 240-volt appliances have to have their own circuit. If you're adding other things, let's use a Christmas lighting scenario. It's hard to measure that because people, these massive displays have become pretty common nowadays, and you can look at the load of a single string, and it has very minimal electrical load, but then you start stringing, 10, 20, 30 of those together, and you start linking them together, you're starting to overload those cords. They're not designed to have several. They'll have a limit on them. If you read the label on them, they'll tell you how many you can add to the end because they all have a plug, so you can link one string to another. Well, if you continue to do that, you're going to overload that cord. You can literally melt the cord of the string of lights without ever tripping the breaker, feeding that circuit. So that's the biggest danger, is actually overloading the wires of your decorations. Now, so many, there's other devices, the air pumps for the big inflatable displays. Those take more power. And so you just have to look at what you're wanting. If you do a huge display, again, call an electrician, let them evaluate, and run in a dedicated circuit to the outside. Most of your newer houses have a 20-amp circuit run to the exterior outlets, and usually should be sufficient. An older home, less likely so. Sometimes the outlets are just tapped off a general usage 15-amp. You may have a good part of the house being already supplied by this outlet on the outside. Once you plug in this additional load, you're going to trip the breaker. So again, if you're wanting a huge display, call your electrician, let him look at what your service is, what the possibilities are to get you what you need there.
I could see how easy it would be I do it. I just start plugging in lights and your Christmas lights and things like that. We're decorating for Halloween and all the holidays prior to Christmas. And you just keep linking them together because you don't want to have to route them all back down to the original outlet source. So I would imagine that a lot of people, I could see how fires could happen because it's just melted.
Very simple. And another issue there is going back to the GFCIs. This is an outside outlet, it's a wet location, and so they must be plugged into a ground fault outlet so that it will trip it. That provides life safety so no one gets shocked. What a ground fault is, it just has a little transformer in it. It measures electricity leaving and the amount coming back. And if it's not within 5 milliamps, then it will trip. So it's just in effect saying, hey, all electricity is not coming back. It's gone into something or somebody, and so it shuts it off. And so it's not a circuit breaker. It doesn't protect you against overloads. It protects against shocks. And so it's required on all outside outlets, and so make sure that yours is protected by one.
So don't do what I do. Actually read the instructions and don't assume that they're just suggestions.
Very good. Yes, that's a good idea.
You've been listening to Real Estate 101. We'll be right back after the break.
They just told us right away that we're going to house you, we're going to feed you, and every single one of his medical bills is just all taken care of.
They've saved my family from financial ruin. It allowed me and my wife both to focus on the most important thing, which was the health and well-being of our son.
We have phenomenal research, outstanding clinical care, and the generosity of public, which allow us to treat patients regardless of what it takes. And that's what makes St. Jude so magical.
At St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, families never receive a bill for treatment, travel, housing, or food, because the only thing a family should worry about is helping their child live.
Doctors send us the toughest cases to be treated at St. Jude, and our patients come from all over the world.
When we come here, they told me, don't worry, everything's been taken care of.
We could never repay St. Jude for what they've given us.
Because of you,
Gracias a ti.
Because of you.
There is St. Jude.
Whether you explore your national forests and grasslands by car, motorcycle, four-wheel drive, or by an all-terrain vehicle, please remember that all-terrain travel doesn't mean all-terrain. Forest Service land managers have recently created detailed maps to show off-highway vehicle enthusiasts and others where they may legally operate motor vehicles. Remember to travel only on routes designated as open to motor vehicles, as shown on motor vehicle use maps available at Forest Service offices or by visiting respectedaccess.org. Click on the Motor Vehicle Maps link located on the home page. Follow these motor vehicle use maps to help keep national forests and grasslands in a healthy condition and to maintain public access to these beautiful backcountry landscapes. This message is brought to you by the nonprofit organization Tread Lightly, the USDA Forest Service, and this station, who remind you that respected access is open access.
Thanks for joining us again. Today I am here with Chuck with CWC, and we're talking about different ways to take care of your electrical needs and things to look for. So walk us through a house. What are the things that a homeowner should be taking into consideration whenever, because, a lot of homes are older. What should they be looking for whenever they're looking through their house and say, okay, now I need to call an electrician?
Well, you want to first of all consider the age of your house. Topeka is an old city. We have a lot of houses in the 100-year-old plus range. Those houses initially had what we call knob and tube wiring. There's some inherent dangers with that. It's not, I don't want to scare anybody saying, hey, your house is going to burn down, but it's something that needs to be closely evaluated whenever, let's say in a remodel project, walls get opened up, take that opportunity to replace that wiring. That knob and tube should never be in contact with insulation. And so if you see that in your attic where there is insulation, you need to call an electrician have that evaluated and have that removed. Then as you move up into the next generation of wiring, it was jacketed but had no ground wire. So you have ungrounded outlets. So then you want to make sure the thing with ungrounded outlets, an older house, is if it is ungrounded, it has to have a two-prong outlet. It can't have that three-prong, or it has to have a GFCI outlet. The code allows that. The code allows the GFCI protection to again, it puts in that life safety. It doesn't provide a ground. People think, I've got that. It's got that third prong, so it's grounded. It's not. In fact, we're required. If we put a GFCI on an ungrounded circuit, we have a little label that we put on that outlet and says no ground available. It's just providing life safety. In some cases, you have a piece of equipment in an older house, you want it grounded, and so you need to talk to an electrician about what it would take to route proper wire up there and ground it properly. Other issues, like I said, having the simple tester going through, making sure everything's working. If it's not, have an electrician evaluate it. Simple thing that's really a big danger sign is if you see flickering light, if you have an appliance or lights that are flickering, that indicates there's a loose connection somewhere. A loose connection is arcing. Arcing is a very high temperature. It's thousands of degrees, and it's sitting there. It's burning that outlet. It's burning an outlet. It's burning a wire nut. It's burning something somewhere when you see that flickering. And so that has to be found. It's a huge fire hazard. It's a huge sign. Your house is trying to tell you something. There's something wrong. Get it fixed. And again, if you have something not working, a section of a room, you've gone and reset all the breakers, everything's on, but a section's not working. Again, you've got something, a connection that's gone bad, that's a possible fire hazard, and need to have that evaluated.
So electrical boxes and the panels, are there things that a homeowner should take into consideration? Because we see, and the reason why I ask, is we see very often where people have done a lot of their electrical work themselves. And so whenever we do home inspections, or we have a home inspection, they see where things are double tapped and things along those lines. And then there are also the Federal Pacific boxes that, we oftentimes end up having to get replaced. Things along those lines. What should a homeowner be considering? Because you really shouldn't be doing it yourself unless you really know what you're doing. Suggestions on just, if you move in and you didn't get a home inspection, what should you be concerned about?
Okay, a good question. A couple simple things. One, if you have fuses and not circuit breakers, the old screw inlet, that you definitely need to have that replaced with a proper circuit breaker panel. Next, the Federal Pacific panels, they are a danger. Now, most home inspectors won't inspect them even. They just say it needs to be replaced. I mean, anybody has any question about that, if you go down and look at your panel, one, Federal Pacific stab lock, those are they have a label on them that'll tell you that. Also, they have a trademark orange-tipped circuit breaker handle, so they're easily identifiable. But to make a comparison today, most people are familiar with Volkswagen, how they falsified test results to show their cars were getting better emission standards in order to sell. Federal Pacific did the exact same thing back in the 70s and 80s. They falsified laboratory results that showed that their circuit breakers worked properly when, in fact, they knew they didn't. And so they lost their UL, or Underwriter's Laboratory listing. They have about a 30 to 40% failure rate. And when I say failure, I mean they will not trip when they should. Instead of people say, everything that never trips, it always works. Well, that's what they're famous for. Electricians will call them welder panels, because you can sit there and overload something and they will rarely trip. And so a circuit breaker by design is supposed to be the weakest link in your electrical system. It protects everything else. So it is the weakest thing. The wire, the outlet devices are all stronger than it. If you overload it and it doesn't trip when it's supposed to, then you're operating the wire, the outlets, the devices at a much higher amperage than they're designed for. Well, amperage equals heat, and you start doing serious damage to the house. So I cannot emphasize enough that the Federal Pacific stab locks panels have to be replaced. And it's not a popular thing. I've been through this several times. Someone's buying a house or trying to sell a house and say, you have to spend $1,500, $2,000 to make this safe. It doesn't make anybody happy. So, but it's something so simple. I try to tell people, I'm not trying to scare them. I'm not trying to sell anything. Just Google it. And you will find tons of information, tons of stories, pictures of what these panels will do. They are a danger and have to be replaced. Now, moving on past that, let's say you've got an acceptable panel, but you talked about double taps. Well, what you mean by that is people have terminated several wires on a single circuit breaker. Now, there are a couple brands of circuit breakers that allow that. They're actually rated to have 2 wires. And so sometimes an inspector will automatically look at that as double tapped and doesn't work, or it doesn't pass inspection. But if we look at the actual brand, and if it's rated for it, it's okay. But if it's not, that's a simple fix to take care of that. We can make the connection outside, away from the circuit breaker, and terminate a single wire to the circuit breaker, and that fixes that problem. But over many years, people have done work, added circuits. They've really, if you think about it, if you built a house in the 1960s versus what we have now, our electrical load is vastly increased. And so depending on the square footage of your house, the appliances you use, the size of your family, you may need to upgrade from, perhaps a basic 100 amp service to a 200 amp. And again, electrician can help you walk through that decision and give you an estimate. I mean, but you can generally in the ballpark a couple $100 either way, about around $2,000 to upgrade a typical service. But if you have perhaps several different what we call disconnects or sub-panels, it's all been just cobbled together over many years, again, to make sure that the grounding and everything has been kept in proper order. You get into stuff like that, you really, again, should have an electrician evaluate it. And most electricians in town will come out and look at something like that for no charge or a minimal charge to give you an idea what you need to do.
I had a gal tell me one time that she couldn't run the vacuum cleaner and the washer and dryer at the same time. I would say that's probably your best bet that you need to do some electrical upgrading.
Absolutely. And that's, there's a sign there. You can tell just by what you said there, we know things were not wired right, because the dryer, and we mentioned earlier, any 240-volt appliance, which a dryer is, if it was an electric dryer, you should be on a circuit by itself, not be affected by anything else. Washer, it should be on a circuit by itself. And so, but that's the case. In an older home, these things are all tied together. So you want to look at, and if you are managing, it's like, honey, turn the coffee pot off because I need to dry my hair. If that's something you have to do every morning, well, you need an electrician. You need an extra circuit run in there. And so you want to evaluate that. But if you can't predict when you're going to trip a circuit breaker, you've got a problem that needs to be looked at. And a lot of times it's a pretty simple fix.
Tell us about you, your company, and how to get a hold of you.
Okay, well, CWC Electric, we're just a small family-owned business. I actually started the company with Castlewood Construction about 9 years ago. I had the opportunity to buy the company about 4 years ago. We have 7 employees, so just a little locally owned Topeka electrician. We have myself and one of my employees is a master electrician. I have 3 other journeyman electricians, and we do service calls, remodels, troubleshoot and repair. That's all that stuff is our specialty. And we get asked constantly, well, I don't know if you do jobs this small. We do jobs of every size. I mean, and like I said, I usually mark out Tuesdays my day to go out and look at jobs, and we'll evaluate. And I've got no problem telling somebody they don't really need anything. They'll be worried about something, somebody told them something, and then we'll walk away from it. But now we're just a small family-owned company, and we're love to help anybody who has a question.
And how should they get a hold of you if they are needing your services?
The best way is call our office. Phone number is 215-8775, or they can email me direct at chuck@cwcelectric.com.
And what is your website address?
It's cwcelectric.com. And that is also, you can learn a little bit about us there. I actually have a page on the stab block panels, and they can actually email us directly from the website.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Chuck, for coming out, and it was great meeting you.
All right. Thank you.
And if you need any electrical work, be sure and call Chuck at CWC. Again, his phone number is 785-215-8775. And if you're looking to buy or sell a house, please give us a call at Realty Executives Preferred Advisors. And our number is 785-213-5188. You can check us out at TopekaRealtyExecutives.com, and we'd be happy to help you.
Thank you for listening to Real Estate 101 with the Karey Brown team from Realty Executives Preferred Advisors. Tune in again next Sunday at 11 o'clock for Real Estate 101.